You're listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bob Keane. I'm the editor-in-chief of the internationally renowned journal Fire Ecology. You have tuned into another Fire Ecology Chats, and we're going to talk about a paper today that I think is wicked cool because I studied fuels all my life and love talking fuels. These guys wrote a really cool paper that you should download and take a look at. We have Andreas Wion and Niko Tutland on the podcast today. Niko, could you introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, my name is Niko Tutland. I work for the Center for Applied Fire and Ecosystem Science at the New Mexico Consortium, and I do a lot of fire modeling and forest ecology.
So, welcome aboard the Fire Ecology train. And you, Andreas?
Hi, yeah, I'm Andreas. I was working as a research ecologist at the USGS in Santa Fe, New Mexico until about 2 weeks ago, and I'm now the Forest and Fire Science Manager at the Forest Stewards Guild.
Well, thank you both for taking your time and talking about this paper. The name of the paper is Representing Three-Dimensional Fuels for Physics-Based Fire Behavior Models, a general framework and case study in a type-converted post-fire shrub field. Tell us about this cool thing.
Yeah, so the premise for this paper is essentially that Andreas and I came on board to this project where we were tasked with using three-dimensional data like terrestrial LiDAR to build 3D fuel bed models for physics-based fire models, sometimes called next-generation fire models, which are a really promising future for modeling the complex fire spread over complex terrain and ignition patterns and 3D fuels. We realized that there was no sort of playbook for taking all these different data types and putting them together to create heterogeneous local 3D fuel beds that faithfully represented a specific landscape. And so as we were working to represent this post-fire shrub field in New Mexico in the Jemez Mountains, we sort of wrote down our steps and tried to come up with a general framework that others could then use to represent fuels in their landscapes. And as we were coming up with different ways of using things like terrestrial LiDAR, aerial imagery, we also developed a few new methods to represent shrubby fuels, which are underrepresented in the 3D fuel modeling workflows that are out there. This paper is sort of a combination. The title is long because there's sort of two parts to it where we present the general framework and then put it in action in the second half while we also introduce these three new methods of representing shrub fuels.
So, a lot of people have done this. A lot of people have done 3D fuel models. And I think the difference between yours and everybody else is the fact that you deal with shrubs. Is there more? Can you expand on that?
Sure. The main issue with modeling fire in a lot of landscapes, especially in the Southwest, is that they've either been modified by some sort of disturbance or even completely type converted from a forest to a shrub-dominated landscape. And most of the tools that are in place currently to create 3D models of fuels come from the world of forestry or rangeland, where there's pretty mature tools for representing tree canopies and pretty mature tools for representing, like, say, a grassland. But when shrubs are present, you sort of end up in the middle where the tools to represent the 3D structure might be obscured from above by tree canopies or not capture the entire landscape if they're from something like terrestrial LiDAR, which samples only a small area. And so shrub fuels currently are represented by simply combining them with other herbaceous fuels like grass fuels, rather than representing them as discrete entities or a fuel type separate from the other herbaceous fuels. And so we took some methods that were already out there. Some of our co-authors had already come up with a way of modeling spatial distributions of individual shrubs, and we applied that across a management unit, and then also developed methods of imputing TLS scans or using aerial LiDAR if those shrubs are visible from above.
That's why I enjoyed reading that paper about the way you melded all those technologies together. It was cool. So, Andreas, I'm going to put you on the spot if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What you did is for research purposes. How far away do you think we are from actually taking your technology and implementing it for managers?
That's a really great question. I mean, a lot of the tools and tricks we use are pretty adaptable and very easy to, with a basic understanding of, say, GIS and a little bit of R, you can whip up these layers for your own landscapes pretty easily. The real barrier to implementation here is the software itself. And Niko might touch on this a little bit, but we're using Quickfire, which is Niko, is that proprietary? Is it a proprietary Lanol product?
It is, yeah, you have to have a
It
license.
is. You need a license license for it, right? And something we realized kind of later on in this is that there are increasingly more avenues for utilizing 3D models and 3D tools in forest management. And a lot of those tools are things we already know how to do. The real moneymaker is the code behind the software. These complex three-dimensional wind fields that interact with topography and fuels and simulate fire spread. I would hope to see those out in the world as soon as possible. But, that's out of my hands.
I think there's an effort from the folks at LANL to increase the accessibility of QuickFire through things like the GUI, the QuickFire GUI. And I think the future for our framework and our new methods of representing shrub fuels is to scale them up within other frameworks. So essentially something like fast fuels, which is a pretty powerful way of representing canopy fuels and essentially taking data from a ton of different places. And our methods, the future we see for them is to slot into a framework like fast fuels or into the QuickFire GUI so that a manager doesn't need to model it in R and have all their different data frames. They can use nationally available data sets. They can upload maybe a ALS canopy height model and then press go. So the next step is certainly integration. And there's a lot of pathways being developed for that right now.
You guys are lucky, or we were lucky from Fuels, is that the fire model, new management-based fire behavior predictions, isn't available yet. So we have some time to go ahead and do it. But, those guys are telling me that it is soon. And so we've got to get ready so that we can provide them quickly. I also tell them that it's easy to manage fire behavior. It's a lot harder to predict where fuels are going to be. So.
Sure. Fire model is only as good as what you put into it. So that's why we're focused on making these locally faithful fuel beds.
Yeah, well, one other thing to end on kind of is my colleagues, well, you must work with Russ Parson and all that stuff at the lab, is that do you think computers and software in the future are going to be able to handle a management-based simulation of your complexity?
I think that's a real selling point for a model like QuickFire is that it doesn't need a supercomputer. And there's technologies out there now where you can run hundreds of simulations and be able to test all the different iterations of different wind fields, different fuel moistures, different ignition patterns. And I do think that the technology is at our fingertips to be able to study complex fire behavior in a simulation modeling atmosphere.
I just wanted to chime in with one more perspective on this. Here in New Mexico, where I'm located, we clearly have experienced many repeated high-severity wildfires, and Niko alluded to, that have transformed a lot of these forest ecosystems into shrublands. A lot of this project was sparked from conversations we had with managers after the 2022 fire season. That was Hermit's Peak, Calf Canyon, Cerro Pilado. And there were folks on the fire lines. These are fuels that have been dense Doug fir forests, and it's burned 3 times, and you've got a ton of heavy fuels on the ground and like 8-foot tall Robinia. And these are just novel fuel beds that we don't understand what's going on in them, how fire is going to burn through them. Like, what Scott and Bergen model would you select for this type converted heavy fuel shrub dominated system? And so these models, not only are they really exciting tools for exploring fire behavior, but they can allow us to probe these novel ecosystems, fire behavior in unknown domains, right? There are many opportunities for these models to explore novel fuel structures and fuel beds beyond the magic of 3D fire spread.
I want to thank you two for coming. I get my fuel fix. Talking to two guys who know fuels, it's great. Appreciate your time on here. Niko, you want to recognize any co-authors or funding agencies?
Yeah, we worked really closely with Ellis Margolis at the New Mexico Landscapes Field Station at the USGS, also Scott Pokswinski at NMC, as well as many other collaborators, including Rod Lynn, Kevin Hires, Grant Hutchings, Hope Nowak, Carolina May, and Jim Gattaker.
Our funding sources at South Central CAS, Climate Adaptation Science Centers, a part of the USGS.
Well, thank you both again. Appreciate the time. Listeners, if you want to read about this incredible advance in technology, you can. Guess what? You can download from our website for free. Niko and Andreas have already paid the freight for you to get it, and you can get it and read it at your leisure for no money at all. I mean, you can't get that at Starbucks. So thank you again, both of you, for being here, and thank you for tuning in to Fire Ecology Chats, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you for listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to our show and leave us a review. To learn more about fire ecology and support our future work by becoming a member, visit fireecology.org. FIREECOLOGY.org.